Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about indirect language stimulation. So indirect language stimulation describes 5 specific techniques that adults can use to help children develop language. ILS is a child-centered approach, which means that we follow the child's lead. We wait for the child to communicate before we respond. And we place the child's language in a communicative context. Okay, so more about indirect language stimulation. You could say that the adult acts like a sports announcer because they're calling the shots and describing what's going on without interfering in the game by asking questions. Since the young child needs to hear language to learn it, we can help them by saying the words for objects and actions. In this way, children can begin to make connections between the word labels we provide and the object or action. These simple techniques don't put pressure on children to speak, but they do give them words that they can use later. Okay, so I'm briefly going to talk about direct language stimulation. So I'm going to discuss why indirect methods are better than direct methods where the child is questioned or commanded and expected to reply. This often confuses young children who are just beginning to talk. This direct approach is how we communicate with those who have language skills. For example, we say, "Bring me the ball," "What is your name?" Very young children may not be able to respond because their language dictionary does not contain information on bring or what. They may also feel pressured to respond. Therefore, indirect language stimulation may be combined with direct language stimulation in therapy with children. Who should use indirect language stimulation? Very young children who are in the process of early language development. It's also specifically designed for children who are ages 1 to 3 years old. And we can also train parents and caregivers to use these techniques at home. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the 5 techniques for indirect language stimulation. First is parallel talk. Parallel talk is when the adult describes what the child is seeing, hearing, or doing. For example, the adult may say, "You have a baby. You feed it." Remember that you won't need to comment on every action. This often gives the child too much information. Don't be afraid to repeat words or phrases. Repetition may be boring to you, but it isn't for the young child, and it helps the child learn. To make repetition more effective, vary the tone of your voice as you repeat words and phrases. The second technique for indirect language stimulation is called description. In description, adults provide word labels for the objects the child is playing with, touching, or seeing. For example, the adult will say, "It's a plane. It's a big plane." In this example, notice the difference between parallel talk and description. In parallel talk, the adult will say, "You're rolling the ball." It explains what the child is doing. In description, the adult will say, "The ball is rolling." It's describing the object. After using parallel talk and description for a while, you can use them together. It's important to remember that the adult should always follow the child's lead in commenting on actions or objects. The third technique for indirect language stimulation is called self-talk. This is when adults talk about what they are doing while the child watches. Adults use short sentences to talk about what they're doing. For example, as the adult is tying her shoes, they may say, "I'm tying my shoes, tying my shoes." This is talking about what the adult is doing and the child is watching. Another example is, "Eat a banana. So good." It seems to be most helpful for children between the ages of 1 year and 2 years old. The fourth technique for indirect language stimulation is called expansion. Expansion is when the adult adds more information to the words the child uses to talk about objects or actions. By adding more words, the adult is revisiting and completing the child's speech without direct correction. For example, if the child says plane, the adult can say, yes, it's a plane. If the child says broken, the adult can say, yes, the plane is broken. Using expansion shows the child that you are listening. When you expand on the child's words and phrases, be sure you are making statements instead of asking questions. The last technique for indirect language stimulation is called expansion plus. Expansion plus is used after the child begins to make his or her own baby sentences. Stretch out the baby sentences by adding one or more short sentences to it. For example, if the child says yellow puzzle, with expansion, the adult will say, you've got a yellow puzzle. But with expansion plus, the adult will say, it's a big puzzle. Again, remember that you are not just correcting, only adding more information to sentences. I just finished discussing the 5 techniques of indirect language stimulation. I will quickly review these 5 techniques. The first one was parallel talk. This is when the adult describes what the child is seeing, hearing, or doing. The second one is description. This is when the adult provides word labels for the objects the child is playing with or touching. The third one is self-talk. This is when the adult talks about what they are doing while the child watches. The fourth one is expansion. This is when the adult adds more information to the words the child uses to talk about objects or actions. And the fifth one is called expansion plus. And this is used after the child can make baby sentences, and it's basically stretching out their baby sentences by adding one or two short words to it. What does the research say? Professionals and parents may initially feel skeptical of indirect language stimulation techniques because they do not require any responses from children, nor do they appear to be teaching talking skills. With these techniques, it's the adults who do the talking. Studies conducted by speech-language pathologists have shown that using indirect language stimulation techniques will result in gains in receptive language. In studies made by the authors of the children who were initially language delayed, over half of them showed improvement in expressive language, which means they had more usable words, longer phrases, and a longer speaking vocabulary, and their speech was more intelligible. In conclusion, indirect language stimulation techniques can be used within the child's daily environment to help develop language understanding and use. Most of the preschool child's day is spent learning about the world through exploration and play. We can take advantage of this time and help the child learn that everything has a name and quality, such as size, color, shape, and function. Adults using indirect language stimulation techniques give children clear information about the world by using word labels for objects, actions, and ideas. Children can take in this information, but they are not required or pressured to speak. Thank you very much for watching the video today, and if you're a speech-language pathologist, you can definitely use this therapy approach in therapy with children ages 1 through 3. And if you are a parent, you can also use this therapy approach, but you must be trained by a speech-language pathologist or someone who understands these techniques. And it will be very easy for parents to use these techniques at home to help their child gain language. Again, thank you for listening. Bye.